Welcome back to Tiny Grimes Games, and today I'm going to do something that I needed to do for a while, and that is rank the houses in Keyforge. Now really for me this is a revised ranking. My old ranking was something like Shadows, Logos, I think I said Untamed, then Dis, Sanctum, Brobnar, Mars. I think that was my old rating. But that has changed quite a bit for me. So before I do the ranking, let me talk to you about how I think of Keyforge. There are 4 things a deck has to be able to do in order to be good, and that really affects how I personally rank the houses. Number 1 is it has to be able to interact with your opponent's amber, whether that's through steal, capture, burn the stockpiles and get rid of it. Some way to interact with their amber, and specifically to be able to get them from some number below 6. Like, I'm not as interested in cards that say, like, if they're at 7 or more, get them to 6. That only works in combination with other cards. That just doesn't excite me all that much. Okay, that's the first thing. Second thing, I want my decks to be able to make keys outside of the key forging step, at least threaten it, right? So just, even if I had an Untamed deck that didn't have it, if we weren't exchanging Archon cards, I want the threat of it, and I really want to be able to have it. I think that's incredibly important with how much stealing is in the game and how much people are also concerned about, like I am, stealing. Another thing it has to be able to do is remove a bunch of creatures. There's lots of ways to be able to do this. Coward's End, Gateway to Dis, 3 Fates is a card I like a lot. There's tons of cards that let you remove lots of guys, and if your deck can't do that, I'm not all that interested. Alright, and the fourth thing is, I want to be able to make amber off of cards. Specifically, I'd like to be able to burst it out a little bit. That's why something like Hunting Witch plus Dust Fairy is super strong, and the other guys. You might be surprised to hear, I haven't said the word creatures yet. And I like my decks to have good creatures. That's great. But to me, that is a distant fifth. Like, if my deck can't do the first 4 things but has baller creatures in it, it's probably not going to be a deck that I'm really all that excited about. Sometimes those decks can be great, but sometimes your opponent just removes all your guys and makes amber and doesn't even care about their creatures at all and still beats you. So this affects how I rank the houses, and let's talk about how I rank the houses. From the first moment I played this game, I came to the conclusion that Shadows is the #1 house. And the reason is simply that it is really hard to make keys when you play against Shadows. It's not just bait and switch. That's kind of like the poster child for Shadows. But I have plenty of Shadows decks that don't have bait and switch that are great. There are so many ridiculous steal cards. Routine Job is one that I have in no decks, but that card is so good, especially if you get like 3 of them in a deck, so you get to steal 1 the first time, next time 2, then 3. It adds up really fast. Restless Whispers is a card I really like that does 2 damage to something. When it kills them, it then steals an amber, so you're able to both do damage and take amber. The Urchin, just a little dude who comes in and says steal an amber. Like, they just have like half of the cards in their set steal, and that is just so strong for what I was talking about, having that deck that can interact with your opponent's resources. Now, you don't have to have bait and switch to be able to do, I mean, you don't have to have Shadows. Other factions can do it. They just don't do it as effectively and as abundantly. Like, it's really rare to find that deck that has a whole bunch of cards in one faction outside of Shadows that does that well. Now, you could have a deck with like 5 Tourettes in it, and that could be really strong. But it's not that likely that that's going to happen. You just open a Shadows deck and you're like, yep, I'm going to have some steal. Occasionally you don't, and it's like, what? All I have is 1 Urchin that steals, and then the deck is wildly disappointing. But usually Shadows is incredibly powerful. That's why I've got him first. Okay. Second for me is Untamed. The signature card for me for that deck is Key Charge. I find Key Charge to be really powerful. The same thing with the character, I can never remember his name, like Chari Hotza or something like that. He's Key Charge on a stick. But having this way of being able to make a key outside the Keyforge phase is utterly critical. And the reason why I talk about Keycharge so much is because it's a common. It's in tons of decks. Like whenever I open an Untamed deck, I'm excited, and then I look and I see if it has Keycharge or not to see if I'm continuing to be excited. But Untamed has not, so it doesn't just have Keycharge though, right? Like it has this way to make guys out of the phase, but then it has tons of removal. One of my very favorite cards in the game is Lost in the Woods, because when I play, I tend to play creature light decks anyway, and so Lost in the Woods is just removing their 2 best guys and I lose nothing. And then even if I am playing a creature deck, oh wow, I lost my 2 worst cards and you lost your 2 best cards, and I can do some slick stuff like, oh, I'm close to the end of my deck and I'm trying to put something together, and I've got the Hunting Witch in hand. Oh, I'll take that Dust Pixie, I'll shuffle them back into the deck and whoop, draw it up next turn. Hunting Witch plus Dust Pixie, 3, boom. And then, you know, Keycharge soon after. So I find that Untamed offers me all these possibilities. They have so many great cards that make Amber. That's what's so great about them. Nocturnal Maneuvers, Exhaust guys, Vigor, heals up your guys. These are all making Amber while they're doing it. And then, of course, there's the rare cards like Bear Flute, which can be absurd to go ahead and start getting bears, and then you play your Keycharge and you use Bear Flute to shuffle your Keycharge back in. They never know when you have it. Mimicry is totally ridiculous, being able to play your opponent's card against them. There's just so many great cards in Untamed. Now the creature suite is a little bit weaker, and so if you're a player who is mostly concerned about creatures, you might look at Untamed and go, Untamed is good? Are you crazy? But I really think the easiest way to win at this game is to make a bunch of Amber and Keycharge. Like, that's just the easiest way to win at this game. It's way easier than, I'm going to play a bunch of creatures, I'm going to cross my fingers, hope you don't remove them, and hope I can, oh, you did remove them. I'm going to do it again. And you're like, cool, I'm going to remove your guys, get Amber, and how are you going to win here? I'm making Amber every turn, like 4 a turn, removing your guys that you can't reap with because they're all dead. So that is a really strong way to do it, and Untamed is awesome at it. Now, it does have some pretty good creatures. The Giant Tiger comes in, does 4 damage to a guy. Halakor and Snufflegator, cards that I originally thought were bad. Skirmish is super strong. They basically have to remove them. Murmook is a great way to slow your opponent down. When they're at 6, you drop them and they cry because they thought you didn't have shadows and you wouldn't be able to stop them. Untamed, bottom line, super, super good. Now, I'm about to say something crazy. I just am. Brobnar is my third favorite now. I think Brobnar is really, really strong. Having said that, I do not think like a Brobnar Mars Sanctum deck is going to be any good. Like, I don't think Brobnar is the faction that carries. I just think Brobnar, for me personally, has passed Logos as the faction for being the third faction you want. Like, I want Shadows and Untamed in all my decks, but I think I would rather have I guess I should say this, a medium level Brobnar deck over a medium level Logos. And the reason is just because this is the one faction that does allow you to basically put creatures on the board and do crazy things with them. And because of cards like Anger and the Gengar Chieftain and the artifact that does it, there's all these cards that let you basically play a dude and then immediately fight with them. And then usually they come with something like Loot the Bodies or War Song or some way to take advantage of the fact that you're fighting. And I found a couple really strong decks that are based around creatures. One deck has something like 2 Follow the Leaders, which basically says everyone gets to fight this turn. And then you play like a War Song and a Loot the Bodies and you get 1 billion Amber. And it's a really good faction for rewarding you for having creatures on the board. Something like Sanctum, to me, is a faction that does not reward you for getting creatures on the board. It's just like, I got creatures on the board. And they're like, okay, you didn't do anything with them this turn. You're like, no, I know. I'm hoping they live. And they're like, well, they're not going to. I'm going to remove them all. And you're like, that's too bad. So I feel like what separates Brobnar is that they have impact when they come in. Like, all the guys do things. Bumpsy comes in, you lose one. Smash comes in, he stuns the guy. Tremor stuns 3 people. Like, they just do a lot of stunning and a lot of fighting on the turn you play them, in addition to getting a board set up. People get freaked out when you have 4 giant Brobnar guys on the board. They start thinking to themselves, I can't really play dudes anymore. Hopefully I can make Amber faster than my opponent can out of hand. But if you're playing Shadows and Untamed, it's really hard to do that against them. Like I said, I don't think Brobnar is amazing on its own. I think, though, it's a great support house for the other 2 houses I mentioned. Okay. 4th place, I think I'm going to have to go with this. I think I'm going to have to go with this simply because of sort of the signature card of Dis, gateway to Dis. And it's not just that it's gateway to Dis. And by the way, the reason why Brobnar makes it, Coward's End. Coward's End is gateway to Dis, essentially. And so they have that mass removal at common. That's a big, big helper. All right, so that's the deal. I think you either want Brobnar or Dis because you want to have mass removal. And Dis has a lot of it. It has 3 Fates is really good. It removes the 3 highest guys. It has Hand of Dis, which is okay, but it has all these annoying cards too, like Succubus that makes him draw less, and the Ember Imp. Oh my goodness! So the Ember Imp looks like he's not good. I mean, because he's only 2, you just assume like I'm gonna play him and he's gonna die. I had a game recently where he lived 4 turns and just destroyed the whole game. My opponent is like, I don't know what I can do. I can't like draw into my removal. The person's deck was pretty light on spot removal. It was a deck that was trying to burst out a ton of Amber, but he couldn't do any of his burst turns because Ember Imp was making it hard. I gotta say, like, that's really rare though. He dies a lot, but apparently when he works, he's amazing. But I feel like Dis has a lot of really, really strong creatures that impact the board. One of my favorite decks has, this is not the guy, I think his name must be Pit Demon. Pit Demon, this guy is really good. This guy allows you to get a board of Dis and keep calling Dis. Because being able to steal one every turn and then fight all their guys with your other Dis characters is really strong. Like if I have a deck with him and like 2 of him, 2 Tourette, who lets you capture their Amber, that becomes really good really fast. So I found Dis to have some really, really strong means of interacting with their Amber. You also have Lash of Dreams, Lash of Broken Dreams actually, which makes their keys cost 3 more. So you have all these ways to interact with their Amber, and that's why I like Dis so much. It's not just gateway to Dis, because like I said, Brobnar has Coward's End, other factions have a way, but Dis just has a lot of removal, and it has some really decently bodied good creatures, and because of that, to me they're hanging out as a really good faction still. I think any of the top 5 are worth having as long as you have Shadows and Untamed with them. So let's move to the next one, Logos, and we're going to go with the obvious signature card for me, as I've said a million times, Library Access. So what makes Logos so good is its ability to do a couple things. If you get the right Logos deck, being able to put stuff in the archives is really strong. It lets you just put together those massive burst turns that you otherwise wouldn't be able to. Stuff like Positron Bolt is really good for whittling their board down. You get an Amber and you do damage. Logos is just really good at having decent cards that make Amber, right? It's not like Sanctum where most of their Amber producing cards you're like, yay, I put this upgrade on a guy, that's awful. Woo! Logos doesn't do that. Logos has like Wild Wormhole, which potentially gives you, 1 for the one you're playing, and then the next card might be an Amber producer as well. Phase Shift lets you play one out of house. Effervescent Principle is a great card for knocking off their Amber, that elusive Amber control, along with one of the most underrated cards. So underrated, in fact, I can't remember his name. The dude who, when he comes in, he captures an Amber, and then when he dies, he goes back to the top of your deck. He's really good. He is really good at just making sure your opponent can't get to 6, and it's really frustrating to play against that guy, always being able to make those moves. So Logos just has a lot of cards like that. Their creatures are pretty awful. They just are. That really holds them back, I think. But I didn't even mention Bouncing Death Quark, which is basically a border removal. Like, it has so many good cards. Like I said, I think those top 5 houses are all really strong. If I have almost any combination of the top 5, I know I got a chance of at least having like a 3 out of 5 deck. And to get into the 4 out of 5, probably need Untainted Shadows. But you could have the right combination of Disc, Logos, Brobnar, I think, and still be competitive. There's enough removal there. There's enough interaction with their Amber. If you get the right cards, you might be able to do it. Okay. 6th for me. And I have no idea what card I'm going to type in. I think it's going to be Battle Fleet. It's Mars. Mars to me is almost like a worse version of Logos. It has a lot of cards that have mild impact that give you Amber. Battle Fleet is really good. It's like a worse version of Library Access, but if you sculpt it well, you can do quite well, and you get all the cards at once, so you can kind of better sculpt and plan out your turn. It's got some really cool combos, which is nice, but it has a lot of dead cards. Like, there's the card that says, like, for every Mars creature who is ready, do X amount of damage. Their guys all die. They're like 2 health. You never have ready Mars characters on the board. It just doesn't happen. But some of their characters have decent impact. They just have low health. My problem with Mars is not that Mars is bad. I think Mars is fine if you get the right cards. Like, if you get a bunch of Squawkers and Battle Fleets and John Smiths and guys that interact with John Smith, you're going to be all right. But if you get a bunch of Biomatrix, which I got a deck right here that I got today, if you watch the podcast, here it is right here, TZ Jarp Crank of the Moribund Vents, it has 3 Biomatrix. That's a problem. Yeah, it's 3 Amber, but it's just a garbage card. And I feel like Mars has too many cards like that. The perfect Mars deck, I have a couple Mars decks I really like. They're very strong. But I got a lot of Mars decks. When I look at them, I'm like, well, that ruins that deck. So that to me is why Mars ends up in that spot. Okay, now it's time for let's see. We'll do the Horseman of Death. Sanctum's last for me. I'm shocked that this is where I am with Sanctum. From where I originally was, I thought they were pretty reasonable. I couldn't get a real good feel for them. I didn't have any Sanctum decks that I thought were good, but they got a lot of creatures with big bodies that kind of stick around a little bit. I just don't find them to be that good. Their non-creature cards have such a low impact that I just don't find them to be all that useful. There just aren't even that many Sanctum cards that I can look at and be like, yeah, if you get that card, you're golden. There's almost none of them. Like, the Horsemen are good just because when they do get wiped, they can come back from the Horsemen of Death. They do set up some cool combos. But just generally speaking, Sanctum, in my opinion, just doesn't have enough cards. It's got Jehu something. He's cool, but he's a rare, and he says, you know, when you declare Sanctum, you just get 2 Amber. But guess what? He has like 3 health and dies immediately. So I just find almost never when I play against Sanctum am I worried. That will just put it that way. Like, if they have Sanctum, I'm like, cool. Now, Virtuous Works, that's a card. That's a card. If I could have a whole deck of Virtuous Works, which I believe is an uncommon, yeah. I only have 1 deck with this card in it, and I have like 35 decks. So this card's baller. But every faction has these uncommons and rares that are great, and I don't think that's how you measure how good a faction is. I think you have to measure it by their commons, and in my opinion, the commons in Sanctum are just not as good as the other ones. They're not awful, right? It's not like I open a Sanctum deck and I'm like, yep, it's not competitive. It can still be competitive. If it's got other good factions with other good cards and has good Sanctum cards, it can still be competitive. That's what's awesome about Keyforge. But for me, right now, today, I'm ranking Sanctum last. So let's go through it one last time. We got Shadows at the top, simply because they can interact with your opponents so well. It's ridiculous. Untamed, Key Charge is just, it's a kick in the balls when it happens, to be honest. I've lost several games, up a whole key. My opponent was at like no amber, right? And it looks like I got this. No. You have to play so differently around them. Like if you can purge Dust Pixie, you do it. You don't kill Dust Pixie. You want to stun Dust Pixie. There's all these little things you have to do to play around Key Charge, which is so annoying. I card wrecks you. Number 3, I said Brobnar. The creatures are so strong in Brobnar, and you get to use them. Number 4, Disc. Disc kind of does everything. It's just a really strong house. 5th is Logos. I had Logos 2nd. That is a tumble for me. It's the funny thing is, it actually hasn't changed for me. It's that other houses have just gone up. Like I still think of Logos as a really good support house. It's just not as good as the other support houses. 6 is Mars. It can be a train wreck or it can be great. And Sanctum is 7th. It's always kind of solidish. Doesn't really do that much. All right. What are your rankings? I want to know. Am I crazy? Am I crazy especially to put Sanctum below Mars? I kind of feel like I am. Let me know in the comments below. Hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you next time on Tiny Grimes Games.